Welcome to Season 3 of the Amani Experience podcast. In this podcast, you will experience wisdom, advice, and stories from creatives all over the world. Your host is the award-winning Amani Roberts, who is a DJ, music producer, professor, author, and undercover gamer. On the show, we love to share the stories of creative professionals, especially people who have gone from the corporate life to the creative life. Once again, welcome to the Amani Experience podcast.
I'd like to welcome Trevor Louie to the Amani Experience podcast.
Hey, Amani, what's going on?
A little bit of this. A lot's going on, actually, as you know. But first off, tell the listeners and viewers where you are. Right now, I'm in LA, right outside LA, Los Angeles, in quarantine life. Where are you?
I am in Toronto, Canada, the reigning NBA world champions. Yes. And I think if things go on the way they do, we may be the first 2-year champions if we don't resume the season.
Right.
So there'll be an asterisk for the 2021 season. But I'm in Toronto, not as hot and sunny as you are in LA, but it's a little mild today and the sun's peeking out. So.
And born and raised in Toronto as well, correct?
Born and raised in Toronto. Moved around a little bit, not too much. I do find that Canadians are not as nomadic as Americans are. And a lot of my business travel in the U.S., I noticed that a lot of people are actually, where they reside today is not where they're originally from. There's a lot of movement, and that has to do with geography and economics as well. So
yeah, definitely. I'm from the DC area, but I now live in LA. I got to give you a shout out for what you're wearing. Got the Jackie Robinson's Dodgers shirt. Much love.
There's a bit of significance behind wearing the Jackie Robinson jersey today too. Not only because I'm not a huge I'm a Brooklyn Dodger fan before an LA Dodger fan, so I'm a Jay fan, but I think everyone's a Jackie Robinson fan, and based on what's going on, it almost seems apropos to put this jersey on today. So
Agreed. Thank you for doing that. I want to start off with a couple questions to kind of lighten the mood, so to speak. I understand you grew up playing soccer, semi-professional soccer, as did I. What position did you play?
I was a sweeper. So in my competitive days playing soccer, I was that big lanky kid sitting in the back in the middle, and anything that came in the air, my job was to go get it. Yes. And if there was a corner kick for us, I was the guy running from the backfield, hoping to catch up with my head. It may have affected how I am today because I put my head on a lot of balls through the years.
Yes, we are almost twins because I grew up playing sweeper, and just like you say, if there was a corner kick or even a free kick, I would run up from the back, try to get my head on it. I think from playing defense and stopper in high school, my senior year, I scored maybe 8 goals, and 6 of them were from headers.
Wow.
So yeah, definitely. So got that in common. The next question is, I know you're a really big Notorious B.I.G. fan. If there was one Biggie Smalls song you would put on repeat, what song would that be?
Ooh, it'll probably be Juicy.
Okay, all right.
There's just something about it. There's so many hits to choose from, and as much as I love Biggie, I love hip hop in general, but yeah, there's just something about that song when it comes on, and just your legs start to shake a little bit and your head starts to groove and your shoulders start moving. So
love it. So explain to us kind of what you do now. And then I also want to get into what you're doing kind of current pandemic and post-pandemic to kind of keep your business evolving.
So I was an event guy on the supplier side for parts of 3 decades, 22 years to be exact, working mostly on the convention, hotel, casino side of things. So I now just what I did in 2018 is I decided to eventually venture off and start my own business. And I'll tell you, when I left to start my own business, I actually didn't have it figured out because I was one of those guys that wanted to do everything and had a very hard time focusing. But in the process of that first year of trying to get a paycheck on the table because the paychecks weren't coming every 2 weeks, you quickly figure out sort of where to focus and what to do. So essentially my agency focuses on 3 things now, right? We've broken them down into 3 streams. One stream is my our company's affiliation with creating restaurant brands and investing in restaurant brands. So we're in and out in some brands. We helped create some, and then we've got a couple that are ours. And so that has a connective tissue to the second stream, which is the event side of the business. And since I came from the event side and was always around food and beverage growing up, and even started on the catering end of things in hotels and casinos, we have a catering arm to the business, which obviously caters to the restaurants. But within that catering perspective, we wanted to differentiate ourselves from a traditional caterer. We talk about creating what we call sensory experiences. We really focus on things on reduction of food waste, curating meals for your events that are meant to fuel you as opposed to fuel you instead of fill you.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
So we really take a step backwards to sit with our clients. We don't have any catering menus. You can't go online and look at our catering menus. Because what I found working in the supplier side for 20 plus years is we spent a lot of money on catering menus, and they're 70 pages long, but no one ever ordered from them. They pick menu B and ask for 7 things to be changed. So we decided, I decided that I wanted to customize, because I think that extra step was the step that people really needed. It gives them the opportunity to say, this is actually what we're looking for. So that's the second stream. And the third stream is accidental content creation. We went from going on the street with my creative partner, who I met at an event that I catered, and he was the photographer/videographer, to going out and shooting some fun content, just literally for fun on the streets of Toronto. Mm-hmm. And that turned into a video series, which is now turning into my first cookbook, which will be released later this year. So the content creation side, believe it or not, is it's called Soulful Food Stories, and it's really the story around things you may or may not know about food in certain communities. And we have ended up using that platform to assist destinations from a culinary perspective. So we work with some cities and some brands, and we'll go into their city and we'll shoot really cool aspects, because the one thing we found is that people travel differently now. Particularly business travelers. They're younger. Right. Mm-hmm. They're more adept to going to source things from references of friends and friends of friends, as opposed to going on online forums and whether it used to be TripAdvisor or whatever it was. So our goal was to go deep into communities and find things that a person traveling into LA mm-hmm. didn't know to go to. Right. So, yeah, everyone wants to go to Beverly Hills and they want to go to Santa Monica and they want to do this. But can we convince them to go down into the LA Central Market to have Mexican Chinese diner food at the Mexican, or like a torta that is unlike any torta. Yes. Right. Or follow Roy Choi and his Kogi truck that's traveling from community to community. These are a lot of things that you can't read in a book. Right. But we wanted to work with destinations on exposing that to people. So,
okay,
that was a really long answer.
That's okay. Good answer. Good background. You mentioned food waste. What are maybe 2 or 3 things we can do as individuals and in the event space to really work on reducing food waste?
Well, it is a fundamental culture shift. Okay, number one, and this message is to the executives that make decisions. Right. You have to be afraid that you're going to run out of roasted potatoes. And I use that as a prime example because we are an industry that is hell-bent on excess. We love to just do the shit out of everything to show that we can do it, mm-hmm. right? Buffets have to be excessive. And so one of the seminars that I've been putting on for a lot of meeting professionals is this whole notion of why we treat our live events and our conferences like mini vacations, mm-hmm. right? So we take a look at a simple calendar day, and you wake up, and let's say we're going to XYZ conference. Wake up in the morning, you go down, and it's the big bad American breakfast. Right, you've got eggs, sausages, bacon, bagels, You name it, it's there. Maybe at the end of the buffet is a bowl of fruit and some granola. And then you go to your meeting. Then you come out mid-morning, and it's the mid-morning break. And it's sugary sweets, croissants, cookies, coffee pop. You guys call it pop or soda out in LA?
It depends. Well, I call it soda. Pop in the Midwest. So yeah.
So we're pop. We're pop.
Right.
And then you go into your lunch, and lunch is generally carb heavy, sandwiches, pizza, starches, big buffet lunch generally, right? Then you go back into your afternoon session. People are kind of nodding off, and then you have your mid-afternoon break, and then it's like the sugar rush. You get cookies and coffee and sodas again. And then the educational part of it ends, right? But the social part usually is what happens at night for these conferences. So you go to your room, you have a drink, you tell your friends, we're going to meet in the lobby bar. You're going to have a couple of drinks, eat some nuts. Then you're going to go to this opening reception. Opening reception is all you can eat, whatever, all you can drink, whatever. Then everyone goes back to the hotel and sits in the hotel lobby and has drinks some more, and then you order room service because you're a little drunk and you want some late night food. So you take a look at that, the dichotomy of what that entire day is. You think you're at a resort in Mexico. That's how we act when we're traveling, right? When we're on vacation. Mm-hmm. We then multiply that over 3 days because the average conference is anywhere between 2.5 and 4 days. And so that connection is the excessive waste that we create to accommodate what we believe is our need to act this way when we're on conferences. Now, I have something called the 1.5 rule. Mm-hmm. The 1.5 rule is if you're in catering, and I don't know who created this, but for some reason in the catering world, if you are on the catering supplier side and your client asks you, what quantity should I order for breakfast? Or what quantity should I order for lunch? For some reason, the answer is 1.5 portions. I think you should have 1.5 pastries for breakfast. I think you should have 1.5 sandwiches for lunch. I think you should have 1.5 cocktails per person per hour. Now, Amani, I'm going to ask you this question. When you wake up in the morning, do you say to yourself, I'm going to have 1.5 Danishes this morning?
No.
And when you go if you go to Subway, and I'll just use just a regular sandwich shop, you don't walk in and say, I'll take 18 inches, which is 1.5 sandwiches.
Right.
So why do in our industry we feel and we believe that we have to be so excessive? And so once we've realized that we need to stop the excess, that's when we can all of a sudden believe that we can pull back and not be afraid to run out, because that's the next phase. If you are okay to pull back, then you're not going to be afraid to run out. So what if you run out of potatoes? There's probably rice there. The world's not going to fall apart.
Yeah.
And so we can go into this a little bit more, but I actually have this as a connective tissue of how you can actually really fix your bottom line on events, as well as use it as an avenue to increase your philanthropic causes while you're traveling to a city to produce live event as well.
Good. Okay, we'll cover that probably a little later. My next question is, I view both of us as creative professionals. What's important for creative professionals to succeed in today's business environment?
Well, you have to be, you have to not have fear of failing. I think that those that are creative are probably the ones that, if they were ever in a corporate environment, were the ones that sat in a boardroom and it was 10 people and you were the one that threw out the most outrageous ideas and everyone turned and looked at you like you were an idiot, right? And, you know, I had this one theory is that when I was always that guy. I was always the guy that had too many ideas. People used to tell me to shut up, and God forbid I got into executive roles. I just wanted to launch idea after idea. Not all of them worked. But if you don't try, you're never going to know. And I guess what's important is, as creatives, we have to find our allies. And I always say that if you're sitting in a boardroom and there's 10 people, you just got to find that one ally. You don't need anyone else. Just one is enough.
Yeah.
Right. Because from that point, it's multiplication.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like you can't stop the thought process of wanting to do something that may look completely idiotic to other people. Right.
Good. What did you do to kind of get over your fear of failure? Because I'm sure initially we are all scared of it. How did you get through it?
I failed. But more than failure, it's understanding that you actually failed. I think sometimes, even when we move to an area where we've done something and we don't take the time to acknowledge that we've done it wrong. And sometimes we do it over and over again. The pandemic has been a very humbling experience.
Mm-hmm.
I went from being an executive in a company, fairly happy with my pay and my lifestyle of, I was in control of my job and the staff that I was responsible for. So it was easy to plan things. To going to starting a new business less than 2 years ago and essentially losing most of it in literally a snap of a finger overnight. Mm-hmm. So failing, and now it's like I have to go back to rethinking differently and trying to be creative, because I feel that the way I positioned my company led me to fail easier when the pandemic hit. Now, granted, I was able to pick myself up and do a little bit of something different and pivot a little bit. But I think that if I thought it out more in my building process, that I may not have been as exposed as I turned out to be as an independent business owner.
Now, how have you been able to still continue moving forward when the business that you had 3 or 4 months ago has changed dramatically? You don't know if it's going to succeed. How have you still been able to be resilient and keep moving forward?
Listen, it's tough. I mean, if anyone, I'm not sure, or some of our viewers might have seen the MPI message that I recorded for MPI that went out last week. And I was, I pulled no bones. I was very honest in that. Like many people, when I got up the next day and the pandemic hit and we were on lockdown, and I realized that things were canceling and things were closing, that I fell into an emotional swirl like many other people did. And I think it's okay to admit that, because it took me a good 3-4 weeks. Granted, I was also sick, so it didn't help, but to get out of that whirlwind of, negative mental health, that state, semi-depression, because not knowing, okay, I'm going to wake up tomorrow and this is still going to be here. I still got to pay my bills. When is this going to end? Right? And so that was really a sombering moment to try to figure out, number one, okay, you understand you're human, you can have emotions, and you can feel down about this. It's happening. And the one silver lining, as horrible as it sounds, is I knew that I wasn't the only one. I knew that there were people to my left and to my right who were struggling just as much, if not worse, right? And so I had to utilize that to figure out what my next steps were. And then I began having conversations. Never in a million years, like conversations like this. I wasn't a big podcast guy. I listened to them. I used Zoom maybe once a quarter.
Right.
I FaceTime, with my mom now and then. But now we have figured out a way to be completely stable and independent online. God forbid we lose internet, because
yes, that would be an issue.
that would be an issue.
Yeah.
So it's trying to figure out how to take some of my expertise and move that online in a way.
Yeah.
And I'm still trying to figure it out. I really am.
Yeah. You and me both, for sure. When you look at your career, when do you feel was a turning point in terms of you realize this is what I'm here to do and I'm all in?
I think my revelation was probably 3 years before I actually left my corporate job. I think life has changed a lot for me, and the perspective is that I view things very differently now. And I feel a sense of empowerment that the only way to achieve what I really want to achieve is if I did it myself. This is not, you know what? This is an indictment on the system.
Okay.
It's the system. I was part of a system that I believe only allowed me to get to where they thought I could get to. Even though in my mind, I knew that I could achieve much higher and do greater things based on what I think I can do. And at some point, you need to decide that the life and the career that you chose, climbing that ladder, because that's what we preach to everyone, right? We all preach to climb this corporate ladder to get to that mountaintop, to know that you're one notch away from the mountaintop and you're told don't even bother. Right? And sometimes they don't have to tell you don't even bother, you know. And so I knew, right, 3-4 years before I left, I knew that at some point my time would have to come, because there was nowhere else for me to go. And I felt that the only way to have the sense of achievement would be to achieve it myself. And if I fail, I have myself to blame. I'm not blaming anyone else, but if I succeed, I also have myself to blame as well.
Absolutely.
Right? And so this is not a knock on the system, because I think at some point you can't get away from it. You're going to have to move through it. Do I think I could have or should have done it earlier? Yeah. You know, everything in retrospect, you could probably do better or faster, or sooner. But I knew that if I didn't do it this time around, at the age of 45, and now I'm 47, I probably wouldn't have done it had I hit 50, right? Because we do know as you get older, you get less relevant. And, I'm going to assume we're both Generation X.
Yes, we are. It's very close in age.
Yeah, I call us the lost generation, right? We are the generation that has worked the longest without achieving what we worked hard to do, because the people ahead of us who were supposed to move on did not move on. And we can blame that for the 2008 recession, when most of these guys and women were supposed to retire, but they stayed into their jobs. And we stayed, and we clipped at their heels trying to get those positions, but they never came because they never left. And then while this was happening, we had an entire generation clipping at our heels coming up called the Gen X's, right? The millennials.
Right.
And we quickly became dispensable, because we were the generation of people that were working longer years in the same positions, carrying hefty salaries, that were carrying companies or weighing them down, knowing that they could get younger people working at a faster pace for less money.
Yes, yes.
And that's why so many entrepreneurs and so many new businesses are owned by the Generation X generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that's not talked enough about. I mean, I think we're also the bridge, I think like you got the extremes of the boomers and the extremes of the millennials. We're sort of like passive right in the middle, right?
Right. Yeah. Why, from the time you recognized that you wanted to go out on your own, why did it take you 3 years to make that move?
One, I am always 120% deep into whatever I do, and I still had a commitment to my employer. So what I wanted to do was see how I can slowly build my brand on my own time and off time. But when I was doing business travel, I would do a little bit more in terms of the volunteer work, associations, networking, to get my name out there within the industry. So they would recognize my employer, but they would also recognize the person behind the efforts that I was doing, whether it was sitting on boards or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you can feel the winds of change coming too. I think that from my perspective, I was sensing the winds of change were probably anywhere between 6 and 18 months away. And I wanted to be able to be in a position where I wanted to go out on my terms, because I felt I earned it. And my boss at the time, who ended up retiring 7 months later, was a big ally of mine.
Right.
We sat together and we worked it out. We figured it out and we worked it out. And I went on my way, and I had already established a few things in terms of what I was trying to do. And this was now my opportunity to, okay, we were at 0 to 40. Now we got to go 40 to 100.
Yes. Yes.
So, yeah.
All right. Why do you love what you do?
What I do now really isn't as different as what I was doing before. The only difference really is when you become an executive at a supplier, you're not as embedded in the creative process as you were when you first started. You're not on the ground with your customers as much. You're stuck in boardrooms having meetings and putting fires out. Not that I didn't like it, but it was sucking the creative juices out of my life. Now, I'll tell you, like, for instance, we had to reopen our kitchens last week.
Right.
But based on the economics of things right now, I can ill afford to bring in the staff that I need to help me get these places up and running. So an hour before I jumped on this podcast, I was mopping floors and emptying oil out of a fryer and, bleaching counters and putting in orders for food for tomorrow. And it's been a humbling experience. But what I do get is I enjoy being able to be part of the process of delivering an experience to people.
Yeah.
Whether it's a piece of fried chicken or it's a catering event for 500 or it's standing on stage and speaking at a keynote, it's about the ability to deliver an experience. It's the emotional connection, right? And you sit in the boardroom too long, cramped up in your tie and your suit, talking about things that never get solved, you get sucked away from the reality of life. Like I always talked about, in the corporate world, there's this invisible shelf. It exists up here. And we all go into a meeting that's supposed to last half an hour, and that half an hour meeting turns into an hour. And what have you achieved from that 1 hour meeting? You have achieved that there are 4 more things that you want to achieve that you put on a shelf, a virtual shelf.
Yes.
And what happens is it stays on that virtual shelf for the next 5 years, right? And that's the problem. And I started not banning, but moving away from meetings. I had eliminated my desk in my office in my last 3 years and brought in a standing desk and a 2-person cruiser table. I removed my boardroom table from my office because I did not want to have meetings in my office. Yeah. People are not allowed to stay in my office for more than 5 minutes.
Great rule.
They needed to come with an idea of a solution to the problem they were going to bring me. I wanted to have proactive discussions, and what I wanted to do is I wanted to empower my staff to be able to come up with solutions and a way to deliver them before coming to me. Because we have long been part of a process where, I have a 15-year-old daughter, and I won't say that she's like this, but a lot of, the younger generation is, and I see this with a lot of my young cooks, is they know the answer, but the shortcut is to ask me the question so I can affirm that answer to them that they already knew.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, in an hour's time, the 20 questions that I get, that those 20 questions the people knew the answers to, that's taking away from my time to focus on building a business.
Yeah, right? So right. Yeah. On the flip side, what is something that scares you?
Well, the pandemic sure scared the heck out of me. It still does.
Yeah, likewise.
We're doing, we didn't bring in a penny in any of our restaurant or catering businesses for almost 3 months. And we had to spend money to rebuild, to open. So what scares me is that this is not going to last or it's not going to work. One weekend I'm already like, man, that was a lot of work. I don't know if this is going to be good or not. Will we be able to meet live again? And that's really something we need to work towards, because live meetings is, I think about the millions of people who are affected in the hospitality industry, not just the restaurant industry, not just hotels, but the supply chain, the farmers, the producers. What scares me is that I don't think that our society can sustain another 3 to 6 months of this. People already can't make rent. People are deciding on food or rent. And there's a part of this that we're actually not talking a lot about, is the mental health side of this. It's just a real tough to deal with, because most of us were already dealing with their own shit before the pandemic hit. And now we just took that and we multiplied it by 1,000.
Right. How do you keep going? Like, when you've just recognized fears that we all have, and like, how do you keep going? Because it's hard. It's not easy.
It's not. I think who you choose to surround yourself with makes a big difference. You know, I've learned to survive with my wife in isolation for 3.5 months. They were close to killing each other, but we never got that far. My parents have been, and my sister have been, they've been amazing advocates. I mean, my sister is going through the same thing. She actually started her own business and left corporate world in January.
Wow.
Right. So talk about bad timing.
Mm-hmm.
So we're committed to working together on stuff right now to help each other. So to me, I really think is you have to take a moment you have to spend some time on your own, first of all, and just take a breather and think. If it's meditation, if it's listening to a podcast, if it's going for a walk. I've started going for pretty long walks. There's not much else to do because you can't go to the gym, you can't go play basketball. Like I miss my weekly basketball run. That's one thing I miss a lot. But surrounding yourself with the right people and finding time for yourself for reflection is really important. And when you reflect, I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it again, is there are people that are worse off than I am right now. Mm-hmm. I'm sitting in our creative studios. This is where we do our editing and our photography and our filming. And our landlord here, lucky for me, has been so cooperative, where we haven't seen cooperation in many other places. Mm-hmm. They called us and said, number one, how's your health? I know 9 out of 10 of my colleagues on the industry did not get that phone call. Right? And then the second question is, listen, we are going to do all our best to apply for government assistance. We're going to defer lease payment for you because the landowners don't need the money. They just need help in covering, property tax and hydro and water. We'll charge you a percentage of that for now. And so I'm very lucky because I've been able to hold on to this studio because this place is our creative outlet. This is where we sort of take all the things that we want to be really creative and put it on film and put it on paper. And the shit sounds crazy half the time, but we can do it in here. And no one cares because this is our space, right? This is a space where I can look at all my Air Jordans and look at the goat on the wall and look at EZ and all the stuff here. It's like, this is I don't want to call it a man den, but this is my creative outlet.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, surrounding yourself with the right network, talking to people. I mean, meeting. I've met a lot of new people. Enough.
Yeah. It's
I've
dope.
met a lot of new people. It is right. Mm-hmm. And I wish I did this earlier. And my creative partner was in here a second ago. I walked and I go, "What is that?" He goes, "I just invested in an entire podcast set." I'm like, "Cool."
Yeah, how ironic.
We're gonna have to invite you to our podcast.
All right, I'm ready. I'm down. Let's do it for sure.
Yeah.
You spoke about failure before. Do you have like a favorite failure that kind of sticks out that taught you a very valuable lesson?
Would that be work related or life related?
Whatever you feel most comfortable in sharing.
Well, listen, the first marriage taught me a lot. So we'll start there. And that was, that was a failure on many levels, because in a way I feel that I not only failed the sanctity of marriage, and I'm very happy in my second marriage, but it's because I learned from a lot from the first one. But the bigger failure there is sort of how I feel it affected my child, right? And so these are things that I live with every single day that I feel like, what could I have done better? Because I really miss the times where I can wake up and my daughter is actually in my house and I can look at her, or she's lying down, I can tuck her in, and I haven't been able to do that for years. Mm-hmm. When it comes to work, I mean, geez, I've had so many failures. It's really hard to pinpoint one, Amani. I mean, I've screwed up so many times through the years. I really, really have.
You're right.
That it's almost become immune. I mean, I think I've epitomized and learned I'm the role model. I'm the poster boy for get up and dust yourself off and do it again because you screwed up. I screwed up a lot. And like I said, I think part of it is really understanding to acknowledge you have failed.
Right.
And my wife would be the first to tell me. She's like, "You're impossible." And we had an argument a couple of weeks ago, and I went away and I came to this studio and poured myself a drink and put on some music, and I said, I am impossible. I don't know. I don't know how she deals with me sometimes. And she was right. And it takes someone really close to you sometimes to call your shit out.
Yeah.
Because some of the people just might not do it for the most part. People are too friendly, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes. Well, there are people that ain't that friendly these days, but yeah. And I think I've been able to learn a lot about myself in my steps of failure. And I'm committed to learn. I'm committed to learning what's happening these days. I'm fully committed to doing more on education and learning on every level of everything. So
yeah, respect. I agree with you 100%. Now, you get a lot of acclaim. You've been in magazines, on covers of magazines. Congrats, by the way. You know, keynote speaker, MPI, like you're very visible. As a result, you do acquire critics, or haters, as we call them. How do you handle your critics?
we need them. We really do. Haters are going to hate. You know, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is to drown them out and to mute them. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're on a magazine cover or if you're a line cook, you will have haters.
Yes, you will.
Every job I've had detractors, those that were either my colleagues, my superiors, or people that reported to me. Even after I leave, I hear people talking shit about me. I don't care anymore, man. Listen, I tell you about this whole thing about you know, at 45 leaving and being my own boss now is I don't give two shits because I'm a grown ass man now.
Yes, you are.
You can say whatever you want to say, so long as you don't involve people that are close to me or offend my beliefs or the things that I hold dear to my heart.
Yeah.
You can say anything you want to me. And I do hear it. I've heard it from my ex-business partners. I've read it online. Like I've been going hard with people on social these last few days.
Yeah.
But because I feel it's a time to not only stand up for myself, but to stand up for other people who cannot stand up for themselves. And I've had enough of this shit, man. So, and here's the other thing. My creative partner tells me this. You ain't made it until you got haters.
Exactly. 100%. Yes.
Right? Someone's listening. Right?
Yes.
And I call them fans too, because if you hate me so much, why are you still listening?
Yes. Yes. Preach. Yes.
Right? You're still trolling me online. You're still reading my post. You're still clicking through. So as much as you hate me, you love me.
Love it. Love it. Now, you kind of mentioned it before. Resilience is a really big theme on our show. Tell us about the darkest time of your life, how you got through that, and what did you learn from that experience?
Oh, so what are we? We are 2020.
Yes.
We're sitting June
1st.
June 1st. Crazy, that's June 1st.
I know.
You know, I think something that really helped me get through the pandemic was the toughest time in my life was probably 2019, probably between January and April. Those were my darkest days. And those were and this is the first time I'm sharing it publicly, actually. That was when I quickly understood and realized the definition of mental wellness and mental health. For the millions of years or million of times, being the one on this side of the desk or office and people coming to me for assistance, never thought that I would be the one that needed an outlet and that needed help. And those are some dark times. I mean, I can tell you, Amani, I was going through some times where I remember I was traveling for a conference and I was 2 hours away from speaking and I wanted to go for a walk because I just mentally wasn't feeling well. And I was walking down the main street of this big city and I just broke down and started crying and I didn't know why. Mm-hmm. And I knew that at the time I was struggling to build my business. I was struggling to settle my divorce. I was struggling to pay bills. I was struggling to close a chapter with ex-business partners and start a new one. And so all of this was caving in all at the same time. And I felt that in the process of failing everything around me, you know, in my heart, failing my new wife, failing my family, failing my daughter as a father, failing as a business owner, I quickly realized I was actually failing myself because I wasn't giving myself credit for what I was putting myself through and going through. And I sought some help, and it helped. And I sought assistance from my family, and they really helped me get through it. And I got through those dark times, and now I'm actually starting to talk about it. And as scary as the pandemic was when it hit, I never hit anywhere close to the low that I hit last year. Right? And I think that may have been a turning point in my life. We all have fiscal responsibilities that we're petrified of. We all have familial responsibilities that we're petrified of. But at the end of the day, like my mother would say, listen, it'll work out. It's going to work out no matter what. You'll figure out a way. Right? And I think getting to that dark point, low point last year helped me with dealing with what's happened these last few months a little bit better than I thought I probably would if I didn't go through that.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing. We appreciate that, your vulnerability. Second, did you walk back down the street and make the speech? What happened?
I didn't have a choice. I was, for me, we are in an industry where you have to be on all the time. In fact, I think that's probably part of the contributing factor of why my first marriage failed is I didn't know how to turn myself off because we're so used to being on all the time. And I tell my friends who are not in the hospitality industry, it's not all champagne, bubbles, and caviar. It's tiring as hell to be on all the time.
Yes.
It's tiring to shake hands and kiss babies and smile all the time. I had a commitment, and I have always been a man or a person that met my commitment. And I had to go back to my room, and it was part of the reason why I was struggling so much at that particular moment is I actually couldn't get a hold of anyone that I could talk to, right? And so I felt really vulnerable and by myself. I got back to my hotel room, and someone in my family actually called me and said, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, I talked it through with them, wiped the tears, put my suit on, went downstairs and delivered what I had to deliver and kissed babies and shook hands and smiled and ate hors d'oeuvres and canapes and then went back to my room.
Okay, good. Well, props to you for getting through it because I know it's not easy. Who was the most influential person for you growing up?
I look at there's a few. I mean, the most obvious certainly would be my parents. But if I take a look at the next is my grandfather, who was the chef in my dad's restaurant. He didn't speak a lick of English, who loved watching hockey and loved the Los Angeles Lakers.
All right.
For the oddest things, we didn't have a basketball team growing up in the 80s, but I did not appreciate. So he died on my 16th birthday, so we share the same birth and death date. And even when I was 16, I didn't understand what I had lost after he died. It wasn't until probably in my 30s that I realized what I had lost to my grandfather. It's because my dad and my mom worked a lot. I spent a lot of time at the restaurant after school and before school. My grandfather was always there. So I was either in a delivery truck with him or, on the way to the markets to buy food for the restaurant. But I look at, I don't want to trivialize or downplay the efforts of my parents, and they are so influential in so much of what I do and who I am today. But I peel it back one layer because at least they knew how to speak English, and they were able to find new life here. Whereas for my grandfather and my grandparents, it was really tough. They came here, they were already elder. When I say elder, they were already in their 50s, and they didn't speak English, so they were going to do what they're going to do, and they were dealt hands that now in hindsight, when I think back to, I couldn't believe the shit that they had to go through. And I just lost my grandmother 3 days before the lockdown, and she was the last grandparent of the 4 grandparents I had. And I look at them all in the same aspect, right? We look at our grandparents who by way of their children immigrating to a new country, they came here eventually as well. And they left the comforts of the things that they knew back in Hong Kong or Singapore. Everyone spoke the language. They can go to their favorite store, eat their favorite food, cook their favorite things. Here, it's like you got to rely on someone to drive you there, and they may not speak English, and there's nothing on TV to watch. And
Yeah.
I just think about that and how hard it must have been to feel accepted, but go through and be successful at a certain level so that I can have what I have today.
Yeah. Well, sorry to hear about the loss of your grandmother very recently. So, hang in there. I'm curious, what do you find easy to do that your friends find hard to do besides cooking? Because that's like a given. That's a given.
And drain those 3-pointers from 2 feet out.
All right.
It is public speaking.
Okay. Yes.
It's not for everyone.
No, it's
right?
not.
And my colleagues and friends in my network will be the first to tell you that I've never said no to a microphone or a camera. So it's not that I love the spotlight, but I don't mind it, and it's something that I learned to like. And when I first started, it was really hard.
Yeah.
My wife is a perfect example. It's a little harder for her. She's more of an introvert, but very sociable person. But this is not her thing, and she wants to learn to do more. And to that aspect, we've learned to be active on social. People are like, look at me like, I don't know how you do that. Do you spend like 12 hours on Instagram? I'm like, no, I spend more like literally 12 minutes.
Yeah.
It's just that I know how to do it, right? And I'm not by no means am I like a social guru and to have 200,000 followers. That's just, I know how to use content and put content out there. It's just something that I learned, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's hand in hand with your brand. So.
Yeah. All right. And then, what do you want to be better at?
Oh, as my wife told me last week, you are so disorganized. I always thought I was organized. I'm organized in my own way. That's a technical side of being a technical human being. I want to be a much better human being. Like if you want me to be honest with you, I'm focused on being a better human being, and I'm focused on being better around everyone, whether it's my family or my friends or strangers. I'm committed to that because I just think that I just think we're in such a bad place these days. Mm-hmm. And we just need everyone to put their best effort to be better human beings. And that's something that I want to focus on. And my problem, my mother always tells me, is that I'm too nice a human being. And that's why I've been taken advantage of so many times, from business partners to employers to friends. But it's really tough to change that. And I feel almost that, like, as much as I want to be a bit more of a dick, I can't. I feel like we need more love, man.
I agree. More love. So might as well embrace it while we can.
Exactly.
When you turned 21, were you still at the University of Western Ontario?
So let me see. I got there when I was 19, 20. So here's another thing that I'm not afraid to share. I never finished university. Mm-hmm. I went for first year, and I partied like a hog, and I got put on probation for a year. So I had to take a year off. So I went back at the age of 21 with a focus on being a better student. And I refound my itch of hospitality. I got a part-time job. Most people get a part-time job being a barista. I got a part-time job being the general manager of the cafe. I ended up running this cafe almost every night, and I loved it. But this goes back, my personal feeling on what we call the quote-unquote system started at a very early age.
Okay.
I had an issue with the university system at the time, where I felt that the inequity of the amount of money that we were paying for me to go into a large seminar room with 700 people for a professor to regurgitate what I read last night was not the creative learning that I wanted at the time. And so I was disenfranchised with the system at the time. Not to say that the system was wrong. It just wasn't for me. So I left the system. I have regrets because that's one commitment that I never kept. I never finished my degree, and thank God my sister went and passed with flying colors in university, but I was the guy that didn't finish it. But at the same time, my mother will now tell me and say, Trev, I realize you never finished university, but you came a long way. You did okay in the end.
Yeah.
But I took the long, drawn out route.
But I think you're doing all right though. So we're not gonna. There's it's not for everyone, and that's keep moving on.
It isn't, and I do a lot of work. I have done a lot of work with academia, more on the college level, on the technical college level, and I think that there's absolutely a place for everyone in terms of they just got to find their lane, right? They just got to find their lane, and if your lane is community college and you can be successful in everything in your aspect of learning there, then that's your lane.
Yes.
Not everyone is meant to go. Western was known as the Stanford of Canada, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
At least that's what they say. But not everyone was meant to go to Stanford or Harvard or whatever. I wanted to go play basketball at Georgetown. I knew that was never going to happen.
Oh, John Thompson, respect. Yes.
Yeah, I was a big John Thompson player fan.
All right.
So.
Okay. Well, we're going to go back and talk to 21-year-old Trevor. Give him advice based on what you know now. What advice would you give your younger self?
Well, outside of being better at investing in money,
Yeah.
That's probably one of the biggest things was, it's not that I didn't understand money. It's that I refuse to respect money at that age. Right? I spent like a 21-year-old knowing that there's lots of this where I came from, far ahead, I'll be okay. And had I started doing what I did in my 30s when I was 21, I think things would be a lot different. When I bought my first home, I think I was 26 or 27. And I think about it now because in retrospect, every time you make a purchase, you're like, I can't afford it. But the next one is like, hold on, this one's like way more than the last one I did. So you look back at the first home you bought and you're like, shit, man, I should have bought 10 at that price. Right? And so you look at all these things in retrospect that you knew you could have done, but because you were so blinded by the fact that you wanted to be a young 21-year-old flexing your might as a young man and partying and stuff, I probably could have done a lot less of that, for sure.
All right.
I worked hard and I partied hard. I'll say that.
Fair enough. Yeah, not so bad. What's the one lesson in life that took you the longest to learn? I'm still learning. I'm better at it, but I'm still not good at it. I got to be a better listener. I have a habit of talking, because you cannot be empathetic until you learn to listen. It's hard to learn and be open-minded and open-hearted if you don't listen. And that's something that I'm trying to be better at. I'm trying not to be tone deaf on a lot of things where, we're so passionate about our stance sometimes that we don't understand what the opposition is and where they're coming from. Yeah. Right. And if we want them to understand where we're coming from, we need to be able to understand where they're coming from. And that starts with listening. Yes, absolutely. Every great person has a sentence. What is your sentence? For example, my sentence is, I love to help people unlock their creativity by teaching them how to DJ. What is your sentence?
Ooh, I've had so many through the years. One of my favorite ones is if you either love fried chicken or you're wrong.
Yes, that's it. That's it. Yes, and I love fried chicken. So let me tell you, I don't eat it very often, but I love it.
Well, I know you're in LA. I was just talking to my buddy in Pasadena last night. I'm like, I need some Roscoe's right now.
Yeah.
I don't think I have a specific saying because you're putting me on the spot anyway, but I know they're probably all over the place. I've got a few in my book that I've written.
Okay. But that's good. The chicken one works. The chicken one works. That's a good
chicken one works, right? I mean, that was something that I created. listen, my fried chicken was once voted best fried chicken in Toronto a few times in a calendar year. So I do consider myself a guy that knows a little bit about fried chicken, and we're selling fried chicken again because we brought it back from life. But that was something we actually created as I called it a Taiwanese proverb, and we wrote that on the side of our takeout boxes. You either love fried chicken or you're wrong.
I love it. That's going to be the title for the episode, just so you're aware.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Now, you mentioned books. If there was 1, 2, or 3 books you feel people should stop what they're doing right now and start to read them immediately, what books come to mind?
I'm a huge fan of The Art of War.
Yes. Stephen Pressfield, right?
I have. There's so many different copies of them because it's how they're translated, right? And I think the one that I have is
it Lao Tzu or?
Well, Sun Tzu is the actual warrior, military warrior for the Chinese who wrote The Art of War. It is a tough read at first. When you take a look at it, you go through it's really, really tough. But I always thought that the second and third time going back was much, much better. I'm not a big book reader. I'm a big cookbook guy. Because I'm a chef. Yeah. I own over 300 cookbooks. And, of course, I'm running my own cookbook. What I tell people that cooks and chefs do with cookbooks is completely different when the average human being does with a cookbook. The average human being buys a cookbook to cook from. We don't. We actually buy the books to read the stories. Because a cookbook is essentially an episode or a chapter in a chef's life of their personal journal. And so you'll generally read in the beginning about their inspiration of this book. What was their travel? What was their inspiration in food and childhood? And then that sings through in their recipes. And that's sort of how my book is written. I started reading Michelle Obama's book.
Okay, yeah,
Becoming. So, and I recently read. I think I have it here. I'm a sneakerhead, so I read Shoe Dog.
Bill Knight, love it. Well done. Yeah. All right. Those are good ones. Tell us about your book.
So my book, which is available for pre-sale on my website right now.
Yes.
It is called Double Happiness: 88 Recipes and Soulful Food Stories. It is my journal of food. My statement has always been, and this could be one of the statements, is I believe that the dining table is our last safe space. It is the one area that we can all, even with our own differences, sit down and enjoy a meal and not kill each other over. But I also believe that for every single human being, there is something about meals that we have enjoyed through our lives that carry us through even today and how we share with other people. Whether it's that smell of those 2 dishes your mom would make on a Sunday morning I could be traveling anywhere in the world, and if I smell it, it reminds me of Sunday morning and my mom.
Yeah.
My book is really about that journey. It's about every footnote and point where I have a recollection of food with my family that I've tried to recreate. So there's the first couple of chapters of food that I remember from the restaurant that my grandfather would cook. I don't know the recipes, but I recreated them based on memory. And what I've done in this book is it is as much a lifestyle experience as it is a food experience. So I have a deep love for sneakers. I have a deep love for basketball and hip hop. I have a deep love for tattoos. And this is all in the book. They're all woven through as stories. And so as chapters go through, there's also a soulful food story chapter that goes through that talks about a particular time of my life. And this was the ultimate creative outlet. Talk about wanting to go and be creative.
Yeah.
First of all, it took me 2 years to settle on a publisher, and I settled on a publisher that allowed me to have the greatest level of creative freedom.
That's very important.
I was not going to let someone tell me how I was going to write my book or how to write my family's legacy or my recipes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it's grammatical and form, 100%. But other
Right.
than that, it was going to be my way.
Yeah. As someone who just released a book a little over a month ago, I know it takes a lot of time, effort, and desire to write a book. So props to you for getting it done. Definitely gonna put my pre-order in. We're gonna add the show notes, the link in the show notes as well. So well done to you.
Congratulations to you for your book.
Thank you. My final question, or final two questions. This one is: if Trevor's coming to the stage, say you're coming out. What's the name? Is it Air Canada Center, right? That's what it's called in Toronto.
It's now called the Scotiabank Center.
Okay, so you're coming out to the court for the Scotiabank Center. Trevor Louis is coming to the court. What song is playing?
Ooh. Let me go into my Spotify real quick, okay, Amani?
Of course.
Let me see what's sitting right here. I mean, there's so many songs that I can play, man.
Like, this is your walk-up song. And while we're doing that, I want to let people know you can follow Trevor online. I put where you can follow him online, but Trevor Louis, this is your first and last name on like all the socials, right?
Twitter is Louis Says, but everything else is Trevor Louis.
Perfect. Okay, here's something playing.
I mean, this is a pretty good walk-up song.
Far Side, Walking Me By, right?
You got it, man.
Yeah. I'm a DJ, so I better know it. Yes.
Yeah, you better. Well, you're also from my generation.
Yes. Good. Great choice.
Maybe that. If it wasn't that, it would definitely be a Tribe song.
Okay. All right.
I'm a huge Tribe Called Quest fan, particularly their first couple of albums, whether it's Electronic Relaxation or Scenario. I love those songs to death. Mm-hmm. But I will tell you the most powerful song from the Tribe Called Quest, and it's perfect for where we are in the state of where we are today, is the song "We the People."
Yes,
that song is. Not only does it have an amazing food reference in it, but, excuse my English, it is a fuck you song.
Yes.
Absolutely. and it's also a hit that Tribe released post the death of Phife Dawg.
Yeah.
And he's in it, right? So it means so much more because the album was supposed to be a tribute to Phife Dawg. Mm-hmm. And it just so happened that when the album was coming out, they said, we got to make this track after what happened to the election. And then this came out, and it's just like, boom. And I was just listening to the other day, and I'm like, this song is so poignant, man. So poignant.
Absolutely. Well, Trevor, I want to say first, I know you're busy. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to talk with us. It's been great. Thank you for your vulnerability. I feel we could talk for another hour, so maybe we have to have a part 2 coming up soon.
We'll do it. Let's do it.
But just thanks again. We let our guests leave us with any last minute words of wisdom or advice. So thank you again, and take us home.
These were my same words of advice as we were going through the pandemic and talking about how we need to sort of be strong for each other. And little did we know that just a few weeks later that we'd be sitting in a state of where we are as a human race. I stand by my Black brothers and sisters in the struggle right now. You may not know this, but I have a mixed child. She is half Black, half Chinese. Mm-hmm. And this is not a political speech, but my speech is about understanding that we need to be united in every aspect of what we do. We need to love more. We need to be more empathetic. We need to be more sympathetic. And we need to listen to each other before we're actually able to have fruitful conversations. And once we have fruitful conversations, we will get to the place or get close to the place we need to get to. And so my message is keep trying, guys. Don't give up. And whether it's the pandemic or what we see going on now, there is going to be a brighter tomorrow as long as we put our effort to do it together hand in hand. So,
absolutely.
And I wish peace and love to everyone. So,
absolutely. Thank you very much. Hold on real quick. Let's see here.